Alright guys, so now we're going to look at chapter 890 on a macro scale, right? Chapter 890, Big Mom on the ship. And what a macro scale basically means is that we're going to look at the chapter as a whole, right? We're going to contextualize it in terms of the chapter itself and the arc as a whole. And instead of looking at individual scenes one by one and seeing if they all make sense and then adding them up to analyze the chapter, we're going to just look at what the context of everything is and what the significance of everything is, right? So I think that's where a lot of disagreements come from. Some people look at the chapter only in a micro scale, and in that way, the chapter makes perfect sense because you can justify pretty much everything that happened in this chapter, and so the chapter is fine. While others look at it at this more broader scale, and when you look at it in that scale, that's when some of the problems start arising, right? So the first thing you're going to discuss is this Big Mom's this rage frenzy mode that she seems to be in that seems to really weaken her to such a state where she's significantly weaker in this state, right? So a lot of people might complain that this doesn't make much sense because she's only been not eating this cake for like 8 hours, but in her flashback she was fasting for like 6 days, and she didn't seem to be that much weaker. It didn't seem to have that much of an effect on her. So what the hell is going on? Why is why is being in this starving state for only like 8 to 10 hours, having so much more of an effect on her than when she was a child and she was starving for 6 days, right? That seems like a pretty big jump, right? And I think the reason for that, I've heard a few decent theories around this. I think Joy Boy talks about a theory in which he compares Big Mom's situation to an addiction. So she's basically going through withdrawal symptom right now, and typically, the more and more you feed an addiction, the worse the withdrawal symptoms get. So the first time you'll have withdrawal symptoms, it won't be as bad. You'll be able to resist it much more effectively than if like the hundredth time. And this probably has happened to Big Mom a lot. A pretty decent explanation for that, but the way I understand this is, and I think this is, in my opinion, a better explanation, and that's that what the difference between what happened when she was a child and what's happening right now is that she was starving for six days. That's true, but that's not what causes her to enter this state, right? It's not the fact that she was starving, it's the fact that she was frenzying, right? That's what's happening. That's what's putting a toll on her, right? So in our flashback, she was, yeah, she didn't eat anything for 6 days, but she wasn't doing anything while she was fasting, right? She was just kind of just chilling out. She was in her cabin or whatever, just looking out the window, or right. After the 6 days, she entered her frenzy. For a specific thing, by the way, she always enters her frenzies for very specific food, right? And she enters the frenzy for a semla. And when we saw her destroy the entire village of Elbaf, or whatever specific village that was in Elbaf, that was just the start of her frenzy. She killed one of the elder giants, and then she was immediately given the thing that she was craving, right? So in reality, we didn't really see her frenzy or rage for that long. Yes, she was starving for a long time, but that's not the key to her weakness. This weakness of her. It's not the fact that she's starving. It's the fact that she's in a frenzy for a specific food. That's the difference. That's the distinction. That's very important, right? Right. So in the flashback, she was only in that frenzy state for like a very little amount of time, or at least a relatively little amount of time. Right now, she's not just starving for 8 hours. She's been in the frenzy. She's been going around destroying things in this rage for a specific dish for 8 hours or 10 hours or whatever the number is, right? And I think this is the longest she's ever been in this state, right? This is the absolute longest, right? I mean, Perospero says this. Perospero is her oldest son, right? Probably her oldest child. I'm not sure which one is older, the son or the first son or the first daughter, but assuming, but still, Perospero is definitely one of the much older siblings, right? So he's been with Big Mom for a long time, and this is the first time he's seen her in this state. And it's probably because every single time Big Mom frenzied for a specific food, her frenzy was quelled relatively quickly, right? We saw this earlier in this in the arc when she went on a frenzy for the Crocun bush or whatever, and Jinbei gave it to her pretty quickly, right? She wasn't allowed to frenzy for hours on end. This is the first time when she's had to frenzy for almost half a day, right? And that's the difference. That's the key, right? And that's what's causing her such physical toll. Now, so I think that's a pretty good explanation for why this is happening, and I think it answers that question of why how come Big Mom didn't have this effect when she was small, because well, this is something different, right? Now the problem still lies in the fact that a Yonko would have such a huge weakness, right? This is a pretty big weakness. Now she's significantly weaker in this state. If Big Mom fought any of the other four Yonkos, maybe not Blackbeard, I don't know about Blackbeard, but if she fought Shanks right now, if she fought Kaido right now in this state, or even Whitebeard, right? Well, not right now, but in two years ago, I think a very few people would say that she wouldn't be defeated, like relatively easily, by those characters. I think that's clear, right? I think Big Mom having this weakness is a big issue because it brings up so many questions about her legitimacy as a Yonko, right? How has no one exploited this weakness of hers? How did nobody? The only argument that you can make about this is the fact that people just didn't know, right? I mean, her family didn't know that she could get this bad, so how would her enemies know that? So, and I think that's a pretty decent explanation because, again, her family is usually there to quell her frenzy, right? They will find a way to get her the food that she wants, because typically the food she's probably craving for isn't so exclusive like the wedding cake, right? The wedding cake took weeks to make, but the semla is pretty, you can find it. I think it's a pretty common food in Elbaf. The croquembouche again is pretty common, right? It's not that hard to make. But the week, I mean the cake, that takes a while to make, and I think because of that, her just nobody else, just nobody knew about it, right? It comes down to that, and so you could explain it in that way, but I think the major issue with this weakness comes down to our perception of what a Yonko should be as a reader, and I think this is where Oda kind of messed up. From a storytelling point of view, I think Oda should not have portrayed Big Mom in the way he has right now. What he should have done is given us a proper portrayal of Big Mom. Her in her show her to us in her full glory, right? At full power, doing just destroying people, right? Because that's how we saw Whitebeard. Whitebeard, well, I mean, he wasn't at his full power, right? Because he was old and ill, but Whitebeard, he was his perception was that he was destroying people. He wasn't the one taking the L's, basically. He was dishing them out for the most part. And then at the end, we saw him lose, right? At the very end. And even then, he went down fighting, right? That's what we saw Whitebeard as. And I think Oda should have portrayed Big Mom in a similar way, and then maybe go into this arc, and then we see her kind of falter. I think it would have been accepted a lot better if that's how Oda wrote the story, right? But then you could kind of get into the whole situation of, well, One Piece is already so long. I mean, there's so much story left to tell. If we add another introduction to Big Mom, I mean, this is supposed to be an introduction for Big Mom. So if we have another introduction to Big Mom, and this is the second, arc focusing around Big Mom, and then we have a third one where we defeat her, that might be a little too much, right? But still, the problem remains that Oda just portrayed Big Mom as this having this weakness way too early into her character. Maybe this is something we should have found out about later, after we already had an understanding that, oh yeah, Big Mom at her strongest is extremely strong, right? Now, I think Oda can still save this by redeeming Big Mom near the end of the arc. Um, I think I forget where I saw this, but I remember reading some sort of theory about how Stussy, at the end might call on like a buster call, or Stussy might notice that the Big Mom pirates, they're in disarray right now. They're very vulnerable right now, right? Luffy's right about to escape, and Big Mom, she two of her commanders have fallen. The third one, Katakuri, that's up in the air. So, Big Mom, she's there for the taking right now. So maybe she calls in like a Buster Call or something stronger than a Buster Call. Maybe a Kizaru comes in, and this might even help the Straw Hat escape a little bit, because this would obviously be a huge distraction for Big Mom, but what this could do is Big Mom kind of turns her attention to the Marines, and she's just like, you guys think you can take advantage of me, and you think I'm weak right now, and then she completely just decimates the entire fleet, and maybe when Kizaru was just like, fuck, and I gotta get the fuck out of here, this is a bad idea, and I think that would be a good way to redeem Big Mom. But I think she does definitely need a redemption at this end of the arc, but I really don't think we have time for that. I mean, the arc, there's still the conclusion of this arc is still like not started yet. The Big Mom hasn't gotten the cake yet. You know, Luffy and Katakuri hasn't wrapped up yet, so there's still a lot of arc, and Wano was supposed to start this year, so I don't know if there's time for that. But I think that is what's needed, and I think that's the major flaw with this arc is the fact that it's just a poorly timed arc, right? Oda has portrayed Big Mom in this way at the wrong time, right? Because this will stick with us forever, and Big Mom will always be known as the Yonko who couldn't, catch half a Straw Hat fleet, right? And that's another thing I want to point out. I feel like a lot of people want to argue that the fact that Luffy's here with only half his crew is a major weakness for Luffy. When in reality, I think that's an advantage for Luffy, right? Because our mission here isn't to fight the Big Mom pirates, right? We're not here to take them down. We are here on a, grab Sanji and get the fuck out of here. That's our mission. So, and whenever you do infiltration missions like this, where you're kind of going in and then coming out as fast as possible, um, having the smallest crew possible is always, an advantage, right? You want to have a small crew because it makes it easier to get out. Now, the problem that comes with that, though, is the convenience factor. And while you could analyze all the minor convenience that has happened throughout this arc, or even in the chapter itself, I think it can all be summed up by the fact that we somehow conveniently have like the three best counters to Big Mom probably in the entire world. Right? That's probably the most convenient thing, and they're all in one ship together, right? If we didn't have Nami, like, what could we have done? If we didn't have Brook, who was like the only person who can damage Big Mom's, homies, we probably couldn't have done anything in this situation. Jinbei is also a pretty good counter to Big Mom because he's able to manipulate body water, right? So we just have the perfect crew right now, the perfect small crew, and I think a cool. I know isn't something that One Piece is known for, so I understand why like scenes like that isn't, or scenes like this isn't in One Piece. But I think a cool scene would have been at before the arc when we're in Zou. Maybe like we have a character who knows Big Mom very well, right? He knows all the intricacies of Big Mom's power and how it works. Maybe he worked under Big Mom. Maybe another mink that worked with Peckham's or something, and he tells the Straw Hats like, "Oh hey, by the way, Big Mom's power. I think you should take Nami and Brook with you." I feel like they might have something that they can offer when it comes to dealing with Big Mom's powers, right? I mean, how would he know that Nami and Brook were such great counters? I mean, you could say that, but like, I mean, oh wow, he would notice like, oh wow, uh, Nami can control the weather. I know Big Mom has weather manipulation. Maybe that could work in Nami's favor. Hey, you should take Nami. I know One Piece isn't a tactical anime like that, so you won't see that. But that would have kind of dealt with a lot of conveniences in this arc, because a major convenience in this arc is that, oh shit, Nami can just control Zeus. It makes sense, but like, wow, that's just so fucking convenient. Brook can just damage Big Mom's homie. How fucking convenient, right? That's the problem, is that we're having to swallow this convenience pill way too much. And but the thing is, it makes sense, right? It does make sense, and that kind of brings me to the last point of this analysis, and that's that: does making sense equal quality, right? Does Just because something makes sense does not mean it's good, right? And in my micro analysis, the whole point of that video was to make sense of everything, and like I said, it's pretty easy to make sense of everything that has happened, right? There are some minor details, not in this chapter, but like in the previous chapter, where I really couldn't find a good explanation. That just felt way too, forced. For example, Luffy grabbing Katakuri and dragging him into the mirror world. I think that was a little too convenient because it just makes no sense. Like, Katakuri should have seen that coming. He has future sight. I mean, I don't understand how he did not like dodge that attack. It doesn't make sense. So that's one example of something that I feel like is just a little bit too much of a stretch, even in the micro scale of trying to make sense of the smallest thing. But other than that, and a few other things probably, everything in the chapter makes sense. But is it good? Does that make it good? Yes and no. I think it doesn't make it good because, like I said, with the convenience of the crew being the perfect counter to Big Mom, it's convenient because it just happened that way, right? Our crew just happened to have these characters. We just happened to take the right characters with us. What if we took Zoro instead of Brook? We'd have been fucked, right? And so that's where the convenience has come from, which could have been fixed through a more tactical approach, which One Piece isn't known for. So that's something you do have to take into account. Now, so because of that, it's not good, right? Because you can you can justify so many things in so many different ways, but like if it doesn't do bode well for the story and for the characters, because this definitely does not for Big Mom, it's not good. So it's not good in that way. However, one point that I do want to make, and this is probably the last point of this video, and that's that this is a story, right? I've heard people who say things like, the Straw Hats aren't ready for this. They shouldn't have gotten into Big Mom's territory at this time. We should have saved Big Mom for another time. But at the end of the day, this is still a story, right? We need dramatic tension. We need to build the stakes more and more and more. This is not just a story. It's a ridiculously long-running story. We've seen Luffy go up against so many different, opponents and so many different stakes. Oda has to keep it interesting. Oda has to keep one-upping, his arcs, and that's just not possible if we have another like safe arc. Like if we went up against like someone weaker, like maybe an arc focusing around just the Vinsmoke, like we've dealt with so many like minor characters. We need to get into you know the major villains of this arc, and that's the Yonko. And so in that from that perspective, I think it's fine. It's we need to do this. We need to have a one-on-one with a Yonko. We need to have interactions with the Yonkos directly for the purposes of the story. Because if we're going at a much slower pace, One Piece is gonna go on for another like 5 years, like on top of it's already projected run, right? And I think that Oda just does not want that. So and again, we're not even taking down Big Mom right now. This is just the introduction to Big Mom. This is us, sure, messing our operation up a lot, but we're coming back for Big Mom. We're still having we still aren't close to taking down a Yonko, right? The next arc, the Wano arc, I don't believe that's we're gonna take down a Yonko at Wano. So that means, counting this arc, there's still 2 more arcs before we actually get to taking down Yonkos, and then there are 4 of them, and then we'd find the One Piece, and then we have to do the war after the One Piece. So it's a shit ton of stuff to be done. Adding more stuff to pad out the story, it might make more sense. It might be more believable and therefore more acceptable. But increasing the stakes in this dramatic way, it's more entertaining. Like as much as you can say about this arc, this isn't my favorite arc. I think in the New World, this is probably the second best arc in the New World. It's better than Dressrosa in my opinion, and the reason why it's better than Dressrosa and why it's the second best boils on the fact that this arc is entertaining. Like I've been entertained in this arc, right? So and that comes from the fact that Oda has upped the ante so much, and that's the proper way to write a story. You want to continuously up the ante. You might say maybe he went too far with this one, and I think that's the stance that will separate this arc for everybody. Do you think he went too far? If yes, this arc isn't a good arc. If no, if he's just at the edge, and I think, in my opinion, I think he was just at the edge, and he was almost boiling over the line in some situations. But I think I will give Oda the benefit of the doubt till the end of the arc to just bring it back. If he redeems Big Mom by the end of the arc, if all the other plot points converge and in a meaningful way, I think it's worth it. So there you go, guys. That's my macro analysis. A lot more problems arise when you analyze this arc and this chapter in a more general sense. and I think that's what a lot of people who don't like the arc is doing, and they have complete valid, you know, issues with the arc, with the conveniences, with the way Yonko is being portrayed. Those are completely valid criticisms. If you guys haven't seen my macro analysis, that'll go into more specific scenarios and uh, give you justification for them. But yeah, so that was my analysis of the chapter 890. Um, I will probably be back with another analysis of chapter 891 for my next video. So look out for that. For now, Scopper Gaban out.